Hi there, I'm Vincent Bos, and I'm a life coach, relationship coach, and breakup coach. You can change the language of this podcast in the YouTube video settings. And in today's podcast, we're going to be discussing your ex will never admit this. I provide audio coaching for breakup recovery, trying to get an ex back, attracting someone new, and life coaching. Visit www.dateme.tips for more details. Please check your spam and junk folders if you are expecting an email from me. Subscribe to my weekly support emails. The link is in the description. So now let's get back into today's podcast. And today we are discussing your ex will never admit this. So if you have been dumped and want to try to get your ex back, you might be surprised to hear about what your ex really thinks. In today's podcast, I'm discussing 3 things that your ex will never admit. So let's get straight into this, and point number 1 is they nearly dumped you earlier. Now let me know in the comments if you feel that your ex considered ending your relationship earlier than they actually did. Let me know in the comments, and let's see what the community thinks. And point number 1 is they nearly dumped you earlier. Now there are more than one way to look at this fact. And I say fact, but of course I can't guarantee with certainty that your ex dumper falls into this category. Although what I can say is after speaking with many dumpers, the vast majority of them did fit into this bracket. And hence there is a very good chance that your ex does as well. And when we consider the fact that your ex-dumper likely nearly dumped you earlier, that can be a shock to the system. What do you mean? They could have and nearly dumped me earlier. Now maybe a few of you do acknowledge incidents and situations where you believe you were nearly dumped because you know you did something wrong. But what if you fall into the category where you don't believe you did anything wrong? This is likely a shock. But the reality is that you were very unlikely to be dumped specifically on the day that it took place. If we consider just a generalized breakup, somebody who comes to the decision to end a relationship and action the breakup is likely to think about things very deeply indeed. We're not talking days, we're not talking weeks, it's often months of deliberation. And therefore, the day they were actually likely to action that breakup is not necessarily the day it took place. Maybe they considered ending the relationship weeks earlier, but decided instead to try and work things through. Maybe you got a lucky escape, so to speak, because of an incident or situation which made your now ex feel that they couldn't end the relationship at that time. Whatever actually did take place, it is very likely indeed that you may have been dumped sooner than it actually happened. Now all of this might sound overwhelming. It might also sound very negative, but there is a positive spin that we can put on the situation. And that is one of the biggest worries and upsets of a dumpee is wondering why your now ex didn't want to fight for the relationship. Why don't you want to try and fight for this? Why don't you want to try and see if there is a way through? Why don't you want to see if we can work things out? That is often a dumpee's worry, sadness, and something that troubles a lot of people who've been dumped. Why didn't my now ex try harder? Well, this is where we can look at things in a slightly brighter light when we consider that your ex-dumper probably nearly dumped you earlier. And that is that if they nearly did end the relationship sooner, but didn't, it is because they did exactly what you want them to be doing now. And that is that they did try to fight for the relationship. It is because they did try and give you and the connection another chance. It is because they did try to push forward and work things through. Now, even though that hasn't happened right now in this current situation, and I appreciate the sadness, the upset that you're going through right now isn't going to be just washed away in the thought that maybe your ex did consider this back in the day. However, it is still important to acknowledge, your ex likely considered ending the relationship sooner, but that also means that they didn't. And whether that was because something took place where they just felt they couldn't do it, at least that is showing empathy. Maybe instead they were thinking about doing it due to a separate incident or situation, but in their own mind thought, no, I want to try and fight for this relationship. I don't want to let it go. I don't want to give up. I don't want to throw all of this away. All of the thoughts and feelings that you are worried about, but they're not showing now, they likely did in the past, the only difference being that they didn't discuss it with you. And this isn't about trying to excuse what they have done. This isn't about trying to give them a free pass. The reality is communication is absolutely vital in any relationship. Dumper and dumpee, post-breakup, can both probably look back and think, yes, I could have communicated better. And if your ex-dumper does fall into the likely category that they could have considered and nearly did dump you sooner, well, that suggests that they had a thought process that if you are blindsided by the actual breakup, you didn't know they was going through it. You didn't know it was happening, and hence, yes, they should have communicated better themselves. It's not about putting blame on them or blame on you or blame on anybody at this stage, but just an acknowledgement that if you were to get back together, communication needs to be better from all sides. Ultimately, whether your ex considered ending the connection sooner or not, the main focus for you now as a dumpee is to try and push forward. That is the best way to get your ex back. It's the best way to move through breakup recovery. And if you don't reconnect, you can find someone even better. You can't be holding grudges. You can't be arguing. You can't be quizzing your ex if you did reconnect with them about this, because that's the point of today's podcast. This is one of the things that your ex is not likely to ever admit. So now let's get into point number 2 and the second point of today's podcast. Please like and hype this video. If you like my content, subscribe to the channel to keep updated. And point number 2 is you influence them. Yes, even now. So today we're speaking about things that your ex will never admit. And one of the most important things that they are very unlikely to ever admit is that you influence them even now. The relationship you had is going to have left a permanent imprint in their mindset. Whether this is music they listen to, whether this is food they enjoy eating, whether it is experiences that they've had with you and now look back on and remember with a very fond memory, all of these things showcase the fact that you influenced them. You may have altered their perception on certain things. It could be anything. It could be a movie. It could be politics. It could be where you want to live. Anything and everything are things that you shared together and will always be part of their mindset and their lifestyle. And this can be really important when we consider about trying to get an ex back, because with the influence you've had on them and vice versa, but of course we're looking at it from this perspective and this angle, you and your ex are much more likely to be aligned with one another, especially if you have been together for a longer period of time. If you dated just for a month, then of course there is going to be less of an imprint on both of your lives from one another. Doesn't mean you will forget each other, but if you were together for a very short period of time, of course the influence would have been less. Whereas now, anything that your ex-dumper does has likely been connected and therefore influenced by you. So when they live their life, meeting new people potentially, possibly, unfortunately, maybe even dating, they're going to be much more aligned with you than anybody else they're likely to meet. In particular, with mannerisms, in particular, with etiquette, in particular, with all of the little things that we don't really think about day to day. It's just the autopilot behaviors that we have. If you have lived together with your now ex, you would have got into a routine. Maybe it was something they suggested, Maybe it was something you suggested. The likelihood is you would have blended lifestyles the longer you were with one another. And these things are going to have that permanent mindset shift about how they like to do things. Oh, I like to load the dishwasher this way. I like to go on a walk at this time of day. I like to do this. I like to do that. All of those influences are going to make them much more compatible with you than anybody else. Now, of course, it doesn't mean that you will definitely get your ex back, because unfortunately, there is no guarantees. It also doesn't mean that they can't find, or you can't find, someone that you connect with in a different way that you also enjoy spending time with. The reality is, Bo, is that the way you've both been programmed, so to speak, is connected to one another due to the time, energy, experiences, and life that you shared with one another. So, whether or not your ex would ever like to admit it, you influence them, and they are influenced even now. Now, if you would like advice and support about how to try and increase the chance of one day getting your ex back, then you may want to consider my audio coaching service, where me and you can speak one-on-one about your unique specific situation. This is the best and diamond level of support that I can provide. Go to my website www.dateme.tips for more information about how I can become your coach and your teammate via my audio coaching service. Talking about your feelings can also improve your mental health. It helps prevent the buildup of negative emotions, which can lead to stress, anxiety, depression, and even physical health issues. Speak your heart to free your mind. So now let's get into point number 3 and the final point of today's podcast. If you feel that this podcast has helped you, then please consider buying me a coffee. The link to do so is in the description. And point number 3 is they still think about you. Now, if you feel that this podcast could help others, please share it in breakup communities, groups, and servers. Let's help as many people as possible. And point number 3, as I've just said, is that your ex-dumper still thinks about you. And we touched on this very slightly in point number 2, but it's important to really emphasize the point here in point number 3. That your ex-dumper will still be thinking about you. You will always be part of their life story, just as they will always be part of yours. And hence, we must understand that as time moves by, your ex will still think of you. In particular, the first few months, year or so, they will absolutely be thinking of you almost day to day. I would suggest that even beyond a year, your ex-dumper will think of you often. Now, we've already mentioned about the fact that they would be influenced by the time you spent together, and that, of course, will mean there are many ways and reasons that they will naturally think back to things they did in the past and remember you. But it goes beyond that. It is all of the triggers. Think of the days of the calendar. Think of when it is your birthday, your anniversary, the anniversary of when you did this, that, or the other. All of these things and more are going to be remembered by your ex-dumper. Then we have the national holidays, the days where maybe you spend time with loved ones. Again, people are going to naturally think back to those times with their former partner. New Year's Eve is an absolute classic example of that, as well as all of the special holidays that are unique to each country. The important thing to remember here is that your ex will never forget you. It doesn't matter if you never see one another until they are 100 years old, they won't forget you, and hence they're going to think about you whenever a trigger comes at them. And the more recently your breakup was, the more often those triggers will occur. Now, you might be thinking, well, my ex dumped me 1 year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. Surely now they don't think of me that often. And it is true that as the years tick by, you will be thought about, not necessarily every single day, but you will still come up in their mind. I'm sure you can think back to the time when you was at school. Try and look back and remember somebody that you were friends with at school that you haven't seen since your school days. I'm sure you can think of someone that you knew at school, but haven't seen since. If you can remember them, then how on earth can you ever consider that your ex-dumper would forget you? How could your ex, who was in a loving romantic relationship with you, forget you when you can remember someone you went to school with, someone who was a friend, an acquaintance, a school friend? You haven't seen them since school. You haven't seen them for years or decades, and you remember them, and yet you are worried that your ex will forget you? You were in a romantic relationship as adults. How on earth would they ever forget you? Remind yourself that, because whilst your ex does think of you, and they think of you regularly, there is always a chance that romantic emotional attraction can build, and if it hits the necessary high point, that is when they might reach out to you.